All right, good evening, everyone. Lovely to see you all. We will just wait a couple of minutes to get to 6 o'clock before we start in earnest. But it's lovely to be here. I'm Luke from Proactive Reporting. We've also got Toby on the team here as well, so he'll be in the background answering any questions on the chat that you've got as we go along. And obviously we've got Lewis and John, the main protagonists, who have been so influential and helpful in getting this project underway. So thanks for having us. And we will, as I say, kick off in a few minutes. If you do have any questions, please put them in the chat and we can answer them as we go along to help you out there. And there will be time at the end for questions and answers. So don't worry, there'll be plenty of time at the end and we're not rushing off. Should take about half an hour to get through the main presentation and then some time at the end, like I said, for some talking points. We'll just wait a few minutes. We've got lots more people coming in, which is very exciting. Very impressed, very prompt on the webinar tonight. We're not entirely sure how many we're expecting, but again, this will be recorded. So you'll get an email after this from Lewis with the recording and the presentation. So as we'll talk through, that'll be an opportunity to share that with people amongst your club. Most people here, I think, are operations managers, but don't worry, the weight of expectation is not for you to do everything. This is just for you to get an understanding of it. You'll probably be the one setting up the account, but that's a fairly straightforward project. And then it's for the volunteers and the coaches to be reporting incidents, to be managing their teams and their players. But it's ideal that we have a point of contact at the club that has a little bit more understanding of proactive, so that they can help others and we can get it used as much as possible. Lewis, anything you want to add? Anything anyone needs to know?
No, nothing from me other than thanking everyone, thanking you for your time to be here this evening. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, same from me, really. I think this is something we've been working on for a while, really, in terms of getting it off the ground. We're really excited about this app in the sense that it can really help push our protocols and protect our players as well as we can. So I'm really, really excited that this can be something that we can push across all the clubs in Wales. Yeah.
And yeah, to reiterate that, the name of the game is, working as a team to make the sport we love safer. I say that a lot for those of you that have any interest. My background is professional rugby. I played for Harlequins, England Sevens, in the generation that, were learning how to be professional, and some things went very well and some things didn't go so well. So yeah, I'm quite very passionate about this particular project. Very lucky to have been invited to be a part of it. And as John says, together with Proactive, we've got a great tool for enhancing our tracking and looking after individuals within the community game, which is where most of the rugby is played. Ultimately, we're all very passionate about the professional game and the national sides, but this is the area where people are playing most of the rugby, and so it's really exciting to be able to deliver a tool that can help people. So we're a couple of minutes past. Like I said, this will be recorded, so I'll crack on with the presentation. If you can't see it or you can't hear me, let me know at any point. Like I said, Toby will be in the chat, keeping up to date with any questions you have. There will be time at the end for questions. So if I just jump in, share. So just quickly, can everyone see a presentation on the screen? Just anyone put their hand up? Good, excellent, brilliant. So, ultimately, for some of you that might not have heard about it and haven't been following along, Proactive is an instant reporting app that was actually created during COVID to help people get back to playing sport across lots of different facets and NGBs within England and further afield. And it became apparent that there was an opportunity in instant reporting to bring it further forward and include concussions. So The things we're going to look at today predominantly are reporting injuries and incidents, and then how we update that into a concussion, which is going to then follow through the concussion protocols that are in place. It's designed to be like really simple. So hopefully, as we said, those of you here tonight might be involved a little bit in the setup. We won't worry too much about it tonight. There is a series of videos that you can go and look at. But once you have a broad understanding of how we set a club up on the Proactive app, then you'll be able to see how easy it is for individuals to then, those coaches and volunteers, to then go and report instances, and for that to be then collected in a central place for your club, so that you can start to understand what's going on and keep track of things that we should all be keeping track of as we go along. Okay, so like we say, it's a digital reporting tool created all the way back in COVID. It's currently been used, I think, for 6 years with the RFU, so there's a lot of track record of being used well, and clubs are really finding it beneficial. You might by now, and please put a hand up in the chat, you hopefully have had a login email which will give you access, and you will be set as a company admin, which will give you the ability to access some of the company setups, add users, etc. So hopefully some of you have had that email, and we have seen that some people have logged in. So again, don't worry if you haven't got round to that, but if you haven't had the email from Proactive with a link to sign up, then at the end, let us know, or I'll leave an email address so that you can let us know, and we'll make sure that we resend that email. We've already had some people log in and get some password resets, so we know that that's happening, which is exciting. And so the process for the operations managers, for the people that are setting it up, is to go online, and the version I will show you in a minute will be the online web version. It is exactly the same in its functionality as the app version, but as you can see here, and I'll show you, have a look on my phone, if you go and search WRU Proactive Reporting app, you will see, he says, I'll just find that. But while I'm doing that, the important thing is that you will set it up on desktop, and then, oh, I don't know, is it going to see my phone? It's not going to like my phone, is it? Because I'm first fail. Oh, there it is. Who knew? So you can see that there's a little WRU logo when you search WRU Proactive Reporting, and then you download that using the login details that you set up. So all of this, hopefully, if you've been using apps and alike, should be relatively straightforward. But like I said, set it up on the online version first, so that if you've got any problems with password resets, etc., it makes it a lot easier. Download the app and crack on from there. But don't worry too much about that. That's something you can go away and do later. What we're going to talk about today is how the app works. So once you're inside it and you're set up, there are a series of essentially modular reports. So it was always designed with the ability to add and subtract these modules for depending on which national governing bodies are using it. And inside the WR version, we have instant reporting, which covers injuries, accidents, things like that. And we'll go through that in a moment. Then you can add on top of an instant, if it was a suspected concussion, you can add in the concussion trackers we can see here. And there is also the ability, if you notice hazards around the club, to add that in, and also a pre-session check, which we should really be doing before session. So those are the main four. The ones you use most are the pre-session check and the reporting an instant. Once that happens, then it will all end up on a dashboard, which we'll look at in a minute. And this is where it's very useful. And again, it's worth mentioning this point, that the way we set it up is that the company admins, probably yourselves, will have access to all the instances that are reported, and they'll see them on their dashboard, and they'll see what stage they're at, and they'll be able to keep an eye on it and manage those, and make sure that everything that should be happening is happening. Below that, we're going to have groups, which are teams. So within your setup, you will set up groups, which we use as teams. So the under 18s, the under 18s girls, all of those, which means that you can then add users, and those are your volunteers and coaches, and they will then be essentially only looking at their instance and dashboard for their team, and they'll only be able to upload instance and concussions, etc., for their team, so that they don't have too much information about other people, and also they don't get overwhelmed from having a whole load of emails about instances that are reported. I get all instances that report across all clubs on a Monday morning, so you can imagine what my inbox looks like. But obviously for most of the people using it, we just want to be able to see the team that they're working with, other than those people in your position that will want a club-wide view. So the dashboard will look the same, it will just only have the information for the level of access that you have. Just jumping back, there is one other useful piece of information which goes in here, which is the medical emergency action plan. And again, there's a video on how to set this up, but that is really useful because once it's in the system under the company profile, it means that every user will have that information. So be that where the fire safety point is, where to get an ambulance or where to call an ambulance, where the ambulance should come to, where the nearest hospital is, all of those really useful things that might be needed in the case of an emergency will be basically on the coach's or the volunteer's phone, so that we know that they've got that, which is a really useful add-on. All right, the big one, the GRTP tracker. And this is what John and Lewis have worked so hard on, to put the protocols that you all know about, that you're all putting into place at the moment when a concussion has been recognized, and allowing it to become a digital passport so that people can actually follow it, and you can follow what the individual is doing, and they can have all the information at the right stages to make sure that they are safe. This has been an absolute game changer in the clubs in England that have been using it for many reasons. One, they know that in the case of people that are younger children, they know that the parents have got the right information. They know they're getting it at the right time. They know that they're following the right protocol. And also the club then has that dashboard that they can keep an eye on things. If somebody hasn't passed the next stage for any reason, they can have that conversation. And as you'll see, you can then share that information, or at least share the stage. We'll be very specific about that when we go through it. You can share the stage that someone is at in the protocol with, say, a school or another sports club that they're working with, so that we can stop the instances that do occur where people go away from the game of rugby having had an incident and recognise concussion, being removed from play, but then actually go and unfortunately are playing other sports that they shouldn't be. So it really does give a really good level of understanding and control for clubs over their players, so that they can keep them safe during the return to play. Just a brief overview. Obviously, as we said, you're going to log an incident. When you do that, that triggers a set of emails. The person that's logged it will get an email. In the case of a concussion, the guardian or the player, if they're over 18, will get the email so that they know what's going on. And that is all automated in the background, like I said, so you can just leave that running, know that they're going to get all that information, and obviously then follow up where needed. So I'm going to jump in now, because I think I've done enough talking, and show you what's going on with the app when we actually go through and progress an incident. Best laid plans, let's go. So at this point, can everyone see the dashboard that I was talking about? Just a quick wave. Excellent, thanks, Lewis, on it. So this is it. So this is obviously a test account. Don't worry about the specifics of the information. This is just my test account. But as you can see, when you log in, the first thing you see is what stage any of the instances that were reported are at, and the buckets they're in. So we've got incidents, concussions, hazards, and pre-session checks. And then you can see at the top all the different elements in the navigation which you're going to need. I will just dip briefly into this because I mentioned it earlier, but when you set up, it's fairly straightforward, but you'll essentially go in, create all the teams within your club that you're going to need to add users to. You can add as many as you like. You can name them however you like. And then the same for users. You go in and you add users, and while you're adding a user, you will then be adding them to a specific team. Like I said, I've done a series of videos on this, so it's a little bit more detailed than that, but hopefully you get the idea that you've got your teams, you've got your users within those teams who are likely to be the coaches, the team managers, and then when they're accessing the app, they're just accessing their group and their ability to add instance for their team. Okay, let's run through one. I think that'll be the most useful thing to do. We'll start with an incident, and then we'll see how that relates to a concussion. But it's relatively straightforward. As you saw, these are the modules we've got in order to report an incident. And it's all relatively straightforward. Again, like I said, this is exactly the same on the app version. Where are we today? And plug in. Okay, it's going to ask you for the activity as summary. So we're training tonight. And the type of incident was unfortunately an injury. As you can see here, there's a few others. There's a near miss, there's violence or aggression. You might be reporting an incident on the touchline, or you can add an other. But if we go with injury, unfortunately, that is the most likely time you're going to be using it. And then here you can see the relevance of the group. So we can add in a group that we're going to apply the incident to. Okay, this is the name of the person. So got hurt. And then the date of birth. Now, we get asked this question a lot. This does not store individuals' data going forward. So obviously it will have their information related to the incident. And Toby shared at the beginning of the chat, the T's and C's about how we deal with data. Once it is gone in this system, obviously you have complete control of it. The WRU and Proactive can see an anonymized version of the data for reporting stats, etc. But it's important to understand that when you put it in here as an instant, that person's information won't be then available when you go in and create another instant. You'll have to add those person's information in again, but it will be associated with this instant. So we're going to go to next, and then it's going to ask us where the injury occurred. Now, on this occasion, just so I can show you the concussion tracker, I'm going to put head and neck. Any of these other ones, when you end this instant of an injury report, that will be it. You'll see, however, there's a slight difference when it comes to a head or a neck injury. So head round with no other injuries. Where did it occur is the place where it occurred. So it occurred on the training pitch. What happened? And you can put as much information here as you need or as is relevant. The next thing is going to ask you what happened after, what in this case first aid was administered. So in this case, who administers it? Hopefully you will have a first aider on call if required. Were there any witnesses? Usually there are witnesses, so we'll put coaches, players. We didn't need any medical assistance at that point. And I'm not going to tick that we have informed the guardian. It was a training incident, and I'll explain how that is going to happen later on, but we're not going to tick that. And actions taken to reduce risk. So we're going to do some training on how to fall in the pattern. Our under 10s do a lot of that. Any additional notes? I'm going to put a reminder to tell guardians. Add to concussion tracker. And then this is going to let me go to the next. And as you can see, it's starting to build a picture of the incident. And once you're happy with that, you can go back. But once you're happy with that, it's going to ask you to sign it off. Do that. And then it's going to ask you, are there any follow-up actions? Now, we know there are, because we know that it's a concussion that we're reporting, or a recognised event that we had to remove a player. And then we're going to also tell the guardians. And that is what we're going to put here. And when we submit that, two things are going to happen. He says, one, there we go. We're going to be reminded to add the concussion tracker. I'm not going to do that at this particular point. We'll do that in a moment. It's also then going to add that to the dashboard. So we go back in. Because I put that an action was required, it's going to go into this pot here. And you're going to see at the top, there we go. Tonight, Melbourne, Layla Smith. And if you click in there, you're going to see those details that we put in. And you can add any information that's required. And when you've followed up that information that we're going to do in a second, you can come back in here and you can remove that any action is required. And at that point, it will move over into this green bucket and you can leave it there, but it'll also be there to go back and look at if you need. Okay, hopefully that was relatively straightforward. You saw how easy that to do. And if that's on the app on your phone, super quick as well. The next stage, as we know in this case, we thought that there was need for putting them on a concussion tracker. So this is now nice and simple. You add that. It's going to ask you to look for the incident. In this case, you can see the one that we've just created. That's going to then populate it with all that information. It's then going to ask you what symptoms you observed that you thought it required to go on the tracker. Have as many of those as you require. And here we go. This is the interesting part. This is where it gets really clever. So at this point, and we put guardian in here, it might be that the individual is over 18, in which case you can put their information in, but in the community game, a lot of people will be under 18. So this is where you put in their information, and we'll see what that triggers in a minute. But this is the reason that I put this as a separate incident, because often in the case of training, the parent wasn't there, you don't have their information. So this is a reminder to go away and make sure we do that, which we're going to do now. That is going to do a couple of things. We're going to start the tracker. That is going to send the guardians an email to tell them the incident has occurred. The other reason, and this is just good practice, the other reason for not doing it straight away is the last thing you really want is a parent to get a random email in an evening saying their child just had a concussion event and then worry without being able to explain it to them in person. So my personal opinion, the best practice is create the incident without adding the concussion tracker at that point. Make sure you've had a conversation with the parents, explained as much as you can about the incident, and then obviously that you're going to send them that information. It's going to go in the dashboard under in recovery under concussions, as we can see at the top here. That's great. And within the email that they get and the text, it's going to tell them what stage they're at. And that's where it's really useful, because obviously you know that they're getting the best information. It's also got a link in here to the latest protocol. They can see the whole range of things that are going to occur. Obviously, it's got stage 1 that they're at, but they're then going to see what the other stages are as a reminder. Not every coach is, knows this off by heart. Parents certainly won't be keeping up to date with this, so it's a really good tool for them to then see that information, see what the progression is going to be, answer some of the questions about when can they come back to contact, when we're back playing, so you don't have to field all of those questions. And then at the bottom, it's going to give them a copy link. Now, that copy link can be shared with the other clubs that they might be playing sport at, with the school. But just to stress, it will only give them the stage and the information that's necessary. They will not be able to action the next steps, because what will essentially happen is, as they move on to the next stage, the parents will get another email and another email. And at certain points, they will be requested to pass that individual as fit to move on to the next stage. Only the guardian that gets that email and text will have the ability to do that. The club will not have the ability to do that. That is an important point. So although you can share that link, and that will be able to tell the other individuals that are relevant from other clubs outside of the rugby club what stage that individual's at and what they should and shouldn't be doing. And obviously, as a club, we've just seen, you can go into the dashboard and see where individuals are at in their return to play. What you can't do is move that forward. Only the guardian can do that, and that's from a safeguarding point of view, so that only one person can make that decision, in this case the guardian. Once they start and progress that, and the player's gone through the different stages, as you'll see, they'll end up in the recovered pile, and then, oh look, John has an instant, and then they can crack on and get back to play, and you know that they've gone through the whole process safely. So hopefully that was a quick run through of just how easy it is. Hopefully it's understandable. Like I said, we're here and we'll be at the end for questions. I just thought it'd be useful to have in action, so you knew what you're getting yourselves into. And just to reiterate, as Lewis said, that is for the coaches to manage once you set them up. Obviously, you're going to have an overview of what's going on, and you're going to be able to help them out, but it really is for the coaches to get themselves involved. And we're more than happy, as we've talked about with John, to do some webinars later down the line when coaches have got up and running, and the volunteers are using it if they've got any questions, and run them through it as well. Going back to the presentation. So we've seen the process, and here we go. All those email alerts will come out. The coaches or the club admins will get an email that an incident has occurred, whether that's an injury or a concussion. Like I said, it won't have the ability to progress someone through the tracker, but they will get an update. So even if they weren't training, they'll absolutely know that a player under their care has had that happen, so that they, don't make the mistake of putting them back into training at the wrong time. And they can also go into the app and check what stage that individual is at. We didn't have a look at it, but one of the new features that we've added is the stat dashboard. Now, obviously, most of you are just getting started. There won't be many stats to look at, but this has been really useful actually for the clubs that are using it, and they've been using the app for a while, to look for trends, basically, whether that be within certain groups where more instances might be occurring, and there might be a conversation to be had about doing separate training on certain things to reduce risk of injury. It might be as a club. We've seen clubs report more instances of concussion, at the very beginning of the season. Could they do more to, strengthen, the players up in the right way? John would be the expert on this, to make sure that they can reduce that risk when you're coming back into the season, having not played for a while. Those are things that I think are helpful. And so you can, look across the groups and the club as a whole and get an idea of what is going on, just to be able to feedback and put anything into place that needs to be there. Okay, so we've got that done in 25 minutes. But like I said, so the next steps are, you should have received an email from Proactive with a login, and that should have allowed you on the desktop to log in as a company admin, set up your own account, and you should then end up at the dashboard. You can either, as again, we'll send this presentation out with this links, but there is then a series. In fact, I'll show you what it looks like so you know you're in the right place. There's a series of videos. No, we don't want that. So hopefully you can see a YouTube playlist. So that is the series of videos that you can watch. The first one is actually a demonstration of that I've just run through. So you probably don't need to watch that. Setting up a medical emergency action plan is in there. Setting up groups and teams. Setting up users. Reporting an incident broken down in a little more detail. And then reporting a concussion. And then a version of looking around and how to use the statistics and the dashboard. So like I said, that will be in the email that's coming out after this, along with the recording. And at the bottom there is the hello@proactivereporting.com. So like I said at the beginning, if you haven't had that email, or if you've got any questions, obviously we'll have a Q&A now. But if you're watching this on record, for instance, and you haven't had the information, then there's an email there that you can drop us a line and we'll get that sorted. Toby's been in the chat answering questions as we go along, but I am obviously here now to answer any questions. Lewis, John, anything I've missed? Anything you want to add?
I think from my end, it's download it, have a little play, log a couple of false injuries if you like, so you can start seeing how it is actually really easy to use. And then also you can see where the links take you, how they navigate you through the protocol, and it'll start to make sense then that actually, it's actually telling you exactly what you need to be doing with the player at each stage of time through the return to play process. So it's a little bit of having a go with it now, isn't it?
Okay, brilliant. I've just seen a question, John. That is really useful, because that is great advice. And like I said, you shouldn't be able to break it. So go and play with it, see what you can see. A great question. I'll read the question out. Somebody was just questioning whether a parent can move someone through the stages too early if they're not au fait or not on board with knowing what to do. No, they can't, quite simply.
No.
So that is one of the very useful things that you can't do. So obviously, as a great
it'll tell you
question,
exactly what Yeah, exactly that. The tracker will tell you exactly what the player will be allowed to do at that stage, and only that. So it'll also link you directly to our return to play tool, which gives you clear do's, what you can do, and don'ts, what they are not allowed to do at that phase of time. And it won't be then until you get prompted until the next stage, which the tracker will do. It'll then prompt you at, say, day 8, for example, where they then might be allowed to do a little bit more in terms of their activity along the protocol. So it's hopefully giving you as clear guidance as possible in each phase of time.
Amazing, yeah, and that's a great question and well thought out. But it's exactly what it's built for, is to avoid exactly that, which is people taking things into their own hands. So yeah.
Luke, can I just jump in with a
Yeah,
couple of things?
of
For any
course.
question that I'm not answering, it's because I will answer directly with the person that asked it via email tomorrow. Because there's some that have come through that'll be a little bit long-winded if I start typing a huge message now. So I will answer everything in the chat, don't worry.
A question here. I put my hand up. I'm not sure if I understand. It says, how do you deal with a report permitted players and report permitted players? Is that something?
As a player
Yeah,
that's
I
been
think.
permitted across, yeah.
Sorry, John.
No,
Yeah,
no,
I think
carry on, Luke.
it's only because it's not linked with our WRU player registration, this app, so it wouldn't be an issue.
Okay, perfect. Just that is something we dream of at some point. But yeah, just that is worth stressing. It's not linked to the game management system, so the data you're putting in is your own, and it won't be going anywhere else other than, yeah, the WRU and Proactive have anonymized version of the data for statistical purposes.
Yeah, everyone on the call will probably know there's been quite a long-winded data and digital transformation within the Welsh Rugby Union, and it didn't seem appropriate to try and do that at this very moment, but long term, that's something we'd like to do.
Okay, brilliant. Another question here. They're trying to log in. They've logged in and they're trying to add coaches. Stacey, is that on the app or on the desktop, on a web version? So have you logged into on a laptop or a computer and tried that, or if you logged in on an app? If you could let me know, then I could. On the app, okay, perfect. If you log back in on the web version, then it will all be there. It was just thought at this moment it's a lot easier to do on a web version, but obviously in time it will be available on the app as well.
Luke, on that as well, you're looking for users rather than coaches as well,
Yeah,
in the top right corner.
Groups equal teams. So once you've set, and you have to set up the groups, i.e. teams first, because when you set up a user, you're going to be asked which team you want to associate them with.
Luke, can I just talk about the GDPR quickly and some of the questions around the medical info? So, Proactive, we don't have access. As Luke said earlier, we have access to anonymized data. The data that you submit into the system is yours. Only you can see that information. In terms of sharing medical information, you don't share medical information with anybody. You can download a report, a PDF, for example. That function is available, so you can share that with a parent. You shouldn't be sharing it with anybody else. Now, when you set up the system for your club, not all coaches need to see everything. Luke talked about this at the start. So the club admin can see everything that's in the system. Coaches should only be able to see what's in the system that's relative to the team that they coach. So that's how we keep a little bit more control over the data. Now, in terms of sharing medical information, when you copy the link to share the information about what stage they're at for the concussion, all that does is that it copies where they are, at what stage. It doesn't detail anything about the injury, how it happened, where it happened, etc. It's just what stage they're at. If you look in the chat at the top here, it's got our privacy policy, which it's a bit of a long, boring read, but go in there, have a read through it, and look how we protect the data, because I think that will give you a little bit more reassurance. But I'm going to put something together on email, which I send out to everybody just to give you that reassurance this week.
Awesome. Just answering a few myself. Any login issues, if you are be so kind as to send a email, I'm just putting it in the chat now, the hello@proactivereporting.com email, then first thing tomorrow, Toby will have a look into that and figure out what might be going on. Also worth looking in your junk if you haven't received one, but it may be that we've got the wrong email for the individual that should be getting the login as well. That's what could be happening.
I think it's worth considering as well, you know, as if you're the person in charge of setting this up for your team, is you might, you know, decide which whether it's a team manager for your under 14s. It doesn't need to be all the coaches necessarily that see this information. It might be a team manager for each age group that logs the information, and then you don't need to bog down too many people. So to decide who you want to own it at each age group is probably an important thing to do as well.
Perfect. Hugh, question about sharing with schools. Like I said, there is a link that you can share the stage that the individual is at in their return to play, but that gives them no ability to progress that individual. It really just is information sharing, so that they've got no excuses to say that they weren't aware that the player was at a certain stage of recovery. A good question here about what happens at the end of the year when coaches move through the teams. There's actually a note in this in the video on setting up groups, but actually the easiest way is if the coaches are moving along, instead of moving all the coaches, you just rename the team, rename the group, and then they're all right in the right place. That's a hack for the future. Toby will answer the question, Hugh, in the information he's sending out about sharing medical information when you share the link. So he'll get back to you on that. If you want to drop an email to the hello@proactivereporting.com, likewise, he'll get back to you in the morning with a more detailed answer along with the policy that he's going to send out as well. Any other questions? Has it been helpful? Are we going to get off to a flying start and get as many people using this as possible? That's what we're after. And like I said at the beginning, it's a team game. Like, that is the best thing about rugby. If we work together and get as many people on board, then the more people are using it, the more data we have, the safer we're making the game, the more we're putting people, for instance, in concussion through the right protocol, they're getting the right information, and making the game we love safer. So it's been a pleasure. If there aren't any more questions, there's no rush. If there are any more questions, just shout. Otherwise, like I said, reach out to us. We'll send out the recording of this and the presentation and the details of how to contact us. I think either tomorrow or the next day, Lewis, just so that everyone has time to look at that. Not everyone was able to make it tonight, but a massive thank you to those that did. It's a real pleasure to have you all here.
Yeah, can I just add, a big thank you to Luke for presenting tonight, and just to pick up on Hugh, you just popped that in the question there at the end there. I think what we're trying to do here is give the most appropriate advice to the players, make sure that everyone is communicated as well as possible. So it's about making sure that when a player does sustain an injury, they have the appropriate advice for the stages they're in, but also we communicate as well as we can to other organisations, whether it's schools or other sporting organisations that they're in, that we can raise the awareness that they need to go through the process or the protocol as well as possible.
Awesome. Toby, anything else from you?
No, that's fine. I'm going to work through all of these questions. Anything that we haven't answered properly, I'll be answering this week. Yeah, please send anything into hello that you need answering in addition to what you've got in here. Then we'll answer it.
Awesome.
Yeah, just to reiterate, please go away and have a play, log some injuries. Follow, you can start to understand how it all works, because this is something we want to really grow. We've got 43 people on the call here tonight. We want this to snowball and grow. We want as many clubs and organisations under our governance to be using this, so we make sure that we're looking after our player welfare as best as we can. So again, a big thank you to Toby and Luke for helping us with this.
Absolute pleasure, and a massive thank you to you for providing it free of charge to the clubs. That is a massive step forward and a great opportunity, so that there's no excuses, shall we say, to not give it a go and get used to it and see the value it could add. Amazing. We've had an absolute riot. I'm looking forward to the next one. So, like I said, recording will come out. There'll be certainly more of these for the users, and we're available for any questions. And Lewis is also around. I know he's super helpful. So thank you for having us. Have a wonderful rest of the evening. I hope the weather's good where you are. And yeah, I hope the rest of the rugby season for everyone is a success.